I hope your day went better than mine. Yeah, here we are, April 11th. The Tuesday night crit, presented by Velo. The A race, cat 1, 2, 3. Usually I do not do foreshadowing at the beginning of my video, but I thought for a little excitement I'd show you a later development at the beginning. If you'd like to take a look at that directly, you can fast forward to the end of the video, which is the last lap, and you can see that as it unfolds. But for those of you that you go to a nice restaurant, you don't want dessert at the very beginning. You'll save the dessert to the end. You'll go through the courses. You'll figure out the forks, where the spoons go, the knives, which order, etc., etc., where to put your napkin, how to put the fork back on the plate, when you're, done with that particular thing, whatever that is. I still don't understand all those procedures. Those of you with culture and class will wait until you've seen the rest of the race. So, this is near the beginning of the crit season, so April 11th, this is a while ago, and you might say, hey, why didn't you post this video earlier? And I don't really have a great answer for that, other than I was still processing what happened. And I've done some processing, and I have some ideas about why it happened. Why I know why it happened. And then, of course, thinking about what I could have done differently in terms of handling my stuff to avoid injury and so forth. But we can just talk about that a little bit later. So, for those of you that are not from the Dallas area, or Richardson, or the surrounding suburbs of Dallas, historically we've usually had more than one weeknight crit in our fair metroplex. And the historic and esteemed crit at Fair Park presented by King Racing, they lost the venue last year, was the last year for that venue, so that crit ended and is not there this year. The Fort Worth crit, I don't know exactly why it doesn't exist anymore, but it never was particularly big, being in Fort Worth, a smaller city, and quite far away from people that live in Dallas in terms of getting there on a weeknight. But I think they also lost their venue and maybe didn't have enough participation to make it financially feasible. We used to have a fourth crit besides this particular crit, which was up in McKinney, further north than Richardson, so further away from Dallas, and that was run by Velo, the same promoter, Ryan Chrissy, as this particular crit. But when Jorge, the promoter for the Tuesday night crit for a long time, decided to take a step back, he handed over the reins to Velo and Ryan, and so Ryan's operation switched from McKinney here to the Tuesday night crit. So that basically, you can think of two crits combining into one, with Velo taking over the Tuesday night crit. So, this is a long-winded way of me of saying there's only one crit now in DFW, and it is the Tuesday night crit. And this has led to record participation in this particular crit. Another factor in this participation, I think, is the very modest price to join this crit. So, $20, all you can race on a weeknight. So, all you can race means you can race multiple crits on the same night if your category allows for it. So me as a Masters Cat 3, I can race the B race, which is the Cat 3-4 race. I can race the Masters race, which is Cats 1 through 4, but you have to be over 40. And I can race the A race, which is Cats 1 through 3, regardless of age. Here we see Gary in front of me. We used to be teammates on PAC. He's now on United, and United is one of the big players in this particular crit in the A race. Lots of guys on their team, led by Grayson, and Grayson won I guess when was it? Last year or the year before? He won the Masters National Championship crit, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it was a road race. I think it was a crit. I definitely know he won, so it's not a question of whether he won. But he is in charge of this team. He does a great job building cycling and getting guys into the action and training them up, etc. So, let's get to me. What am I doing? Well, going into this race, April 11th, my fitness is pretty much garbage. And of the racing I had done to this point, I don't think I'd finished a single race. Yeah, so don't really have a lot of expectations going into this A race that I'll be able to stay in. But you've already seen the foreshadowing, so you know that I did stay in, and I was there on the last lap. However, don't really have a team goal in this race. So if you've been watching my more recently posted videos that are from, like this week and last week, you'll know that we have a very focused teamwork, etc., etc. But in this particular race, April 11th, I think it's just me and one other teammate, and the focus is really on the 40-plus Masters race, not this race. Only two of us, and I'm not expecting to do anything or required to do anything for my teammate. It's just race for the experience of it, and who knows what'll happen. But why could I stay in the entire time on this race? Well, it was a low wind race with a big group, and also perhaps some of the dynamics that go on in the race. So as long as I am in the pack, in the draft, not guttered, on wheels, I don't have to spend nearly as much energy as I would otherwise if it was windy, lots of attacks, gaps, having to bridge, or not bridging. I can just fade around the back. You're not really tail gunning in this particular crit because we don't have those kinds of turns. It's almost kind of like an oval. But, trying to stay out of the wind, even if the wind is not particularly strong, taking favorable lines when we're in the crosswinds, trying to take the favorable side of the road for the crosswinds, etc. Just maximizing the conservation of energy. This is something that is very underrated. I've talked about it in videos before, which is don't underestimate the power of being hyper efficient. If you are just like, what is hyper efficient? Like, what if you averaged 20 less watts during the race because of these little choices you were making in the pack? Moving up when it's really easy, staying on wheels, never really trying to put in a hard acceleration, keeping the pedaling smooth, keeping your speed smooth, staying in the draft. You can save a ton of energy. And that's why somebody who's not particularly fit, like me, on April 11th of this year, can do a 28 mile per hour crit. Which, I don't know, this might be the fastest crit I've done, or tied or something like that. So, big group. What do they say? Like, I heard that a guy in the Tour de France said one of the secrets that you don't know about the Tour de France is that, like, strong amateur cyclists, or even not even particularly strong, there are some days you could just sit in the pack of the Tour de France and be fine. Like, let the breakaway go. They're just, spread fanned across the entire road. You just sit in the middle of that. It's easy for them. It's super easy. At least I hear this. Well, same thing applies to being in an amateur crit like this that is fast, but keep your position. Now, if I'm actually involved in the race, I'm in terrible position for that. I need to move up. The race is somewhat narrow, the course, so it's a little bit hard to move up. Usually the place and time that you can move up with such a big group is when you put yourself into the wind. So in other words, people will be hugging the more sheltered side, and then if you go to the less sheltered side, there's usually a gap that you might potentially move up, and if you're lucky, somebody else has already decided to move up, and you just follow their wheel, and you get a free ride as you move up. So I don't really remember the wind in this particular day, but pretty sure it's from the south, which would be right to left. I guess, I'm far enough back that, yeah, it must be from the south with more riders to the left than to the right. In other words, people on the left are more sheltered right now, most likely. Let's talk a little bit about safety consciousness in a crit. So, the first thing... Oh, did you see that? Right there. Guy goes right into the grass. I should rewind that and see why. By the way, it's been a long time since this race happened, so I don't really remember what happened other than the very end. So guy goes into the grass / gravel. Why? We had a terrible crash same day in the B race where somebody went into the gravel like that on the final lap and then caught the lip of the concrete when he tried to get back onto the road. Goes crashing down, falls over on his side at full speed, 30 plus miles per hour. And of course, takes out a bunch of people veering off the course. One of my former teammates broke his arm doing that as a result of that action. So don't leave the course. Especially don't purposefully leave the course. It's dangerous, and we had some stern talking to about that. So, safety. As I was getting back, of course, when I'm talking about safety, someone does something really stupid right on camera. Safety, number one, I would say, is protect your front wheel. You are responsible for your own front wheel. Don't put your front wheel in a dangerous position. If your front wheel is in a dangerous position, get out of that position in a fairly fast manner. So in other words, crossing wheels is when your front wheel is overlapped with someone's back wheel. Their back wheel is stiff. It's not going to move. If your front wheel touches the back wheel, it will move, and it will, you don't want your front wheel to suddenly move when you're going in a straight line. You will crash, or you'll come close to it. If your wheels touch, you got to hold it. First off, don't do it. But if for some reason it does happen, you've got to keep it straight, and you've got to do your best to stay upright. So you are responsible if someone's veering around in front of you, you're still responsible for your front wheel. If someone's terrible in front of you, you're still responsible. You have to take care of your front wheel. Very important. In general, be predictable in your movements and don't make sudden movements in a group like this. So if you are veering around and moving around without regard to the people around you, you are certainly more likely to cause a crash. The crash that did happen, and who knows, I don't think I'm going to do this, but I could make an actual video specifically about the crash, because I have, I've seen other video footage of the crash, of the initial crash, the initial one that happened in front of me. So I don't, it was a combination of a cyclist on the front veering and moving, almost like in a sidewinder fashion, left and right. On the very front, a guy tailing him, and the guy tailing him kind of looks over to his left, if I recall correctly. Keep your hands on your bars. That's another wheel. Don't go touching people. Don't put your hands out. Don't take your hands off the bars. Just saw a rider take his hand off the bars. Anyway, the guy looks over to the left, and just in that moment, his wheel is crossed, and he crashes. And he certainly paid a high price for that. He broke his collarbone, got some really bad road rash, and I guess the side of his leg got hammered by my front wheel as I went over the bars. So, sure, that didn't feel very good. This reminds me of some advice that Brad House once gave me. He is now, I think he might be retired from racing. I haven't seen him at the crit. He's not your young masters, he's your old master, so something happening there. Not quite sure. But got to do a little effort to get back on. Oh, there might have been a crash. Again, this was a while ago, but I think there was actually a crash on the right side of the road. And I forget why it happened. Maybe another cross wheel, not sure. But it is a mad dash to get back on, because if you do not get back on, you probably never get back on. Getting back to Brad. Brad used to be my teammate, and before I did my first crit, I'd asked for some advice on our team forum, on a different team at that time. This was 2 teams ago, so I've been on a total of 3 teams, and since my first team. And one of the things he said is give yourself an out in terms of your positioning. If you are in the very middle of the pack with riders, to the front, to the rear, left and right, there is nowhere for you to go. That is like playing Russian roulette. However, if you're on one side or the other side, you have a bailout opportunity to move around, get around, avoid, and I think that's one lesson from the crash that happened with me. I did not have an out. In fact, I was braking as hard as I could. Can't say that my brakes were particularly effective. My rear Conti 4000 or 5000 had a huge hole from, I think, just my wheel dragging on the concrete as I was trying to slow down. It wasn't like a little tiny hole, it was like a 2-inch hole in my tire. So be careful. I think it's been my observation that crashes are most frequent in the early part of the crit season. You have the biggest fields usually, you have the most kind of enthusiasm, like, oh yeah, we're racing again. You have a deficit of experience, you have people, you kind of, even if you're experienced, you kind of like forget how to do it because you haven't done it in a long time. You have people willing to take absurd risks. There's no reason to sacrifice your health in this. This is amateur racing. There's really nothing at stake. It's not worth a huge pileup. So, I've realized I'm saying the word "so" a lot. I apologize. I suppose that's one step better than saying all the time. Be safe, and especially be careful at the beginning of a crit season. Now, I remember this part. I was on Brent. Brent is the guy who just went around there in the Cadence kit, black kit with the green striped green arm bands. And I thought, I should have followed him. But I did not. I guess I'm a little bit risk averse. And I was talking with one of my coworkers, and I told her I'm very risk averse. And as she's hearing about my bike racing and other escapades, she says, "You don't sound very risk averse." So I guess, you have that, you're willing to take the risk of being in a bike race or even riding a bike at all, but really you don't want to take a lot of extra risks in the process of doing that risky thing. This is the chicane, so really important that everyone holds their line and doesn't carve and veer across the road. This is actually where the crash takes place, like right here. Unusual place for a crash to take place because it's just on a straight. not in a turn, not yet in the full sprint. Definitely right here, you're going to be sprinting for the finish if you are in the final sprint. Some people are early sprinters, some people are late sprinters. This is slightly uphill, just very slightly uphill. It's essentially flat, but it's slightly uphill. There's Adam, 2 bikes ahead of me in the pack kit with the sort of yellow and red. He has since joined my team, so this was earlier in the season when he wasn't on my team yet. Our team, not my team, our team. Cheney Window and Door, which is a UCI professional team with a club racing component. They promote and race track cycling in the United States. Whereas USA Cycling has limited resources, or I don't know how to describe it. They don't do a sufficient job in supporting track racers from the United States. This organization, Cheney Window and Door, this track racing team, kind of steps into that void and gives support to some of the best American track racers so that they can pursue their dream of world championships, Olympics, things like that. You know, you turn on the Summer Olympics, again, people taking their hands off the bars. Even if it's with good intention, it's not a good idea. People have, we watch the Olympics. We want to see Americans racing. And not only do we want to see Americans, we want to see them do well. It's really disappointing when you're watching a track race in the Olympics and there's 30-something people in the field and there's no American. Like, what's up with that? You know, we're a big country. We have lots of bikes. We don't have lots of velodromes, but we have lots of bikes. We should have somebody in that field. And so if you like American track racing and you want to support it, then maybe you can get onto social media and drop a like or follow on Instagram, Facebook, etc., and see what Cheney Window and Door UCI cycling team is up to. All right. We are, 22 minutes into this? And, oh yeah, I think this was the race that I almost had another crash. Later on, in this very exact scenario of moving up on the left side, on the unprotected side, getting behind somebody who's moving up, and somebody sees, like, I'm not close enough to the person in front of me, and someone wants to come over and move up as well, and we touch, our arms touch, our bars touch, we are touching, and we both, in that particular moment, saw our lives flash in front of our eyes, 30 miles an hour, and I don't want to admit it, but I must, because I'm honest. We both said a synchronized S word at the same time. It was perfectly synchronized. Like, you can not distinguish the start and the end of our words from each other. They were like, started the exact millisecond, ended on the exact millisecond. So, I prefer not to use bad language, and I need to do a better job of not using bad language when I'm about to die. So that would be a shame if my last words were a not very nice word. I don't think that event has happened quite yet. It'll happen a little bit later, and who knows. It's very subtle watching it on the video, but in person, in the moment, it definitely was a scary moment. And that's another thing, right? Don't panic if you touch. I've actually had a situation in another race years ago where one of the racers was literally, like, basically laying on me as it was a mixed field of women and men, and she was laying on me, basically. I basically stood her up, kept her up as she fell over on her side towards me. So that was also a fun moment. she was grateful later that I had kept her up. It wasn't my fault. It was neither of our faults. It was the fault of a third person. But again, one of the things that I did when I did a track, so when you, in velodromes, usually you have to go through a safety course that allows you to experience and learn how to ride on the velodrome so that you are registered to be able to race later at the velodrome. And I actually did that course twice in Frisco at the Superdrome, which doesn't exist anymore. And that's another whole story, you know, having a great facility like that not exist anymore. It was owned by a nonprofit, but it was housed at a community college, and it involved the city of Frisco. And basically 2 out of the 3 entities didn't want it to exist anymore, which was the college and the city. So it stopped existing. But anyway, one of the things they did in the training was to practice leaning on each other at very low speeds, which I thought was interesting. I don't think we really do that. I've never seen people do that for training for road racing, of shoulder to shoulder contact at low speeds as you're riding, and just like feeling that and being okay with it, so you don't freak out and crash when it happens in a race. Speaking of track cycling, I saw, so today is June 3rd as I'm narrating this. The race here is April 11th. But I just saw on Facebook that Velo, the promoter for this particular race, this race series, this weeknight crit series that goes through the end of August in Richardson, Texas, is also promoting the new track racing and in Boulder on their velodrome in Boulder, Colorado. So that's pretty cool. Again, Ryan Chrissy and team and others getting together to bring back track cycling, track racing. And I think it will be the first time they've had a track race in Boulder in like 3 years. I think that's what the social media post said. So pretty cool that by, you know, I guess you can say for you guys that are from Dallas here in this race, by participating in this race, you are also supporting track cycling, track racing in other parts of the nation. I think that's a fair statement. Again, I'm not saying that like this race is terribly profitable and the profits are all spilling into other parts of the country. It's not. I don't think it's quite like that. The cost to be in this race is $20, so it's, you know, Turbo Velo could be charging a lot more if they wanted to. But the goal here is to increase racing, promote racing, build racing, get more people racing, especially in the lower category fields, Cats 4, 5, and 3, the C race and the B race, which have had record-sized fields here in Richardson this year. Who is this in front of me? Is this Cato? Can't tell. I recognize his face, but I don't know his butt well enough to recognize it from the rear, nor his bike. It's like I have another teammate ahead of me, 3 bikes in the middle. He wasn't a teammate at the time of this race in April 11th, but he has since switched teams, so that's Jorge. He's now done 2 of these weeknight crits with our team, Chano Windows and Doors. And as I understand it, he was attracted to the idea of racing with us because he saw our teamwork and how we were working for each other, and he thought, I want to be part of a team that works for each other and then tries to do it in a smart way. So that's cool. Going back in time, seeing other people. He's had a lot of experience. He knows what he's doing in the racing arena. I wonder if this is where things almost go to a crash for me a little bit. No, not yet. If I remember and see it, I'll point it out. I don't think it was on this go around. Taking a look at my MPA in the bottom left, 1030-ish. That refers to maximum power available, which is a metric of how much gas I have in the tank. As that number goes down, it means I have less energy in the tank to do anything. And as that number goes up, that means I'm rested or more rested and have more energy. So if I'm at full power, i.e. essentially fully rested per this metric, it should be above 1300. So this means that I am spending time above FTP and I'm not at full strength, but sort of desperation level low strength is when it gets down into like 700, 600, anything around there or less. I'm very fatigued. So just, through that little area there, the number went up quite a bit, meaning that, with this freewheeling, I'm getting some rest. So we are 30 minutes into this. It's kind of hard to talk about the crit action when there is no action. And essentially, anything that's an attempted breakaway is so far out of the realm of where I am that I can't even comment on it unless I pull out a microscope, magnifying glass, put it on my monitor, try to see what's going on way up front. So again, it's really hard to get a breakaway with a very big field on a low wind night up here. Meaning, if we average 28 miles per hour, that means your breakaway's got to average more than 28 miles per hour. So not many guys here solo can do 28 miles per hour. And of course there's motivation, team tactics. Do you have the right teams represented in the breakaway? Now that might change things, but I assume all the breakaways that happened, or attempts rather, it wasn't the right dynamic to motivate the group to slow down and not chase. And so many guys sitting in rested that there's plenty of firepower to move up and chase, and like, oh, I've just been sitting here, I can bridge that, I can move up. So one of the things that you have to think about as you get nearer to the end of a race like this is, what am I going to do at the end? And that's going to be a different answer for different people. Some people know they have no chance in the sprint, so they're not going to get involved. Some people are working for teammates in the sprint, so they definitely are involved. Some people are sprinters, and there are some people who are dreamers, like me. Dreamers that something weird could happen and maybe I could get on the podium. But you have to have good position, and you have to be a good sprinter, and you have to probably take a few chances. I've actually gotten fourth. I definitely have gotten fourth in the A crit, but not with a field like this. And this would be something like 4 years ago. Smaller field, later in the season, not as strong a field. Fourth by half a bike length. Yes, I do remember. So again, if I'm on the podium ever, and it probably won't happen, but if it ever did in the A race, everything would have to work out perfectly. And it would be a matter of I was completely rested and I'm a better sprinter than some. It would be the reason. That's one thing I've noticed. As you move up in category, you get more people that just really have a lot of power and are good, like, breakaway specialists. They aren't necessarily good sprinters, though. So you could have better sprinters at a lower category than you might in a higher category. Has been a little bit of my experience. However, those people that are really good sprinters in those lower category, because they have that sort of explosive power, don't necessarily have the fitness to be there at the end to win. They'll have been dropped. Recently I was watching a NorCal cycling video, and it's just a 5-minute video. He's talking about, I guess, EJ, I haven't really been following that part of his series, but a guy he's training in racing, and he has like a max power of 1700 watts, and he can hold 1500 plus watts for 5 seconds, which is pretty remarkable numbers. I guess weighs about 175 pounds. Doesn't mean he'd win this crit. You have to have, I think he has a super high FTP too, so who knows, maybe he would win this crit, or could win this crit. But the person with the most power or the best sprinting ability won't necessarily win this crit. So you might say, well, gosh, those are better numbers than some of the people that are winning sprints in the Tour de France. Yes, but he would never be there at the end to win the sprint in the Tour de France. He would never get over the mountain or the hills to be there at the end. So there are plenty of these people that have huge power numbers, but they never make any kind of professional level of cycling, even the very lowest professional levels, like in the United States. Having said that, if a person like that is there in the end, this might be where this little sketchy moment happened. Let's take a look here. Is it there? No, I guess not. Anyway, doesn't really matter. But again, this is an example of me gaining positions by getting a free ride. And I'm still way far back to actually matter or have any role in the race. But if you're going to move up, look for ways of moving up in an efficient manner where you don't have to spend the energy to do it, or you're spending as little energy as possible to gain positions. See there, a rider on the right moving up. Looks like I could have room to move up on the left if I was motivated to. Here's a rider on the left moving up. A little bit of empty space. And sheltered too. Once he gets up there, the wind going from the right to the left, he's in a sheltered position. I think. If I even know where the wind's coming from. Guess we're getting closer to the end here. The length of the A race ideally is 60 minutes, but it also depends on when the sun goes down, what time of year it is. Obviously, when it's April, you have less light than in June, so the race is a little bit shorter. That little bit of an uphill starting towards the sprint finish. This is turn 4 that we're going into. Not much of a turn, so you don't have to let off power. It's like, F1. It's kind of like a double turn. You have that little turn, then this final turn. And again, people are more cognizant of wanting to move up. Yeah, there it was, right there. The perfectly coordinated moment of exclamation of death. He's thinking the same thing as me. I want to move up. Let me draft somebody and move up. So again, when I was talking about what you need to do at the end, sometimes a sensible decision is, at best I will get 10th place, therefore, okay, let's say a lower, at best I will get 15th place. Should I really take any risks trying to get 15th place? The answer should probably be no. You should not take risks to get 15th place, but it's really hard to turn off your brain and say, oh, you want to be in the mix, you want to see what your legs can do, you want to see if you can pass people, you want to, sprinting, to get good at it takes practice. You have to do it over and over. You have to learn from your mistakes, learn from what went well. If you don't ever get involved, you won't be able to do it well. All right. Is this the moment? No, is this the moment? Is this the moment? This is the moment. This is the moment. Oh no. Oh no.
Why did you look back?
So you hear someone say, "Why did you look back?" The guy there that's on the left, I guess he's up above me there. He's getting back on his bike. I think we came to a collision ourselves, and I probably have an extra 50 pounds on him. There's me. Someone's moving my bike around for me. Or am I moving my bike at this point? Yeah, so that's how my race ended. I probably should have, so that was the last lap. I probably should have just, you know, eased up, let the guys go. You don't think anything's going to happen before turn 3. You don't think a crash is going to happen. So there it was. This was really my first major crash since racing at all, and maybe really my first major crash ever since road biking since 2002. I've had other more minor crashes and not many of them. Actually, my initial reaction to being on the ground and sitting up was like sort of adrenaline and excitement, because I realized I didn't have any broken bones and my body was still functioning and I was still reasonably okay. In fact, I didn't even tear my kit, actually. Came down pretty hard on my shoulder and especially hard on my hip. My hip hurt for a long time after this, but I have recovered, I think, from the hip. Shoulders, you know, I'm doing some exercises to help my shoulder, but no like major damage. So I got really lucky, and it's really hard to know exactly how to crash. Like, you should, one, if you're going down, I've been told you should hold on to your bars and not put your hands out. I've been injured that way by putting my hand out before. That's what happened last year, where I had to quit racing after 2 races, is because just in a training ride at low speed, slipped out, put my hand out, and I hurt my wrist. That has recovered. So hold on to your bars if you're going down, and you can hold on to your bars. In this case, I couldn't hold on to my bars because I was over my bars. And then you want to perhaps, you know, roll, try to spread out the energy over multiple parts of your body. Maybe have your elbows in and roll over your arms and back. I went more like Superman flying with my arm out, and but it worked out okay, I think, overall. This bike was toast. Brand new bike, actually. The rear stay, I think, broke around the derailleur. So anyway, I don't think I will, but there's a small chance I might actually do sort of an analysis of the actual crash, where I can show you multiple angles. You could discuss like why it happened, but I don't really know that I want to get into it. I've already thought about it enough, and I don't know that anyone really cares that much. So, but anyway, this was, I guess, in some ways the most exciting footage, if you want to call it that I've had so far in racing. And that's not the kind of exciting footage that you want. The guy on the ground did, I believe, break his collarbone, so I haven't seen him since. Then he hasn't returned to racing. So it was obviously unfortunate. And this caused, you know, a lot of discussions, the crash in the B race as well as the crash in the A race here, about safety and what we should be doing in terms of making sure that we stay safe. So I hope this discussion, if you've stayed around for this long, has been useful for you, and I will catch you guys later. Thanks for dropping in. If you feel like leaving a like, wonderful. And if you want to sub, of course. It's a free country. It's a free world. It's not a free world, but it's mostly a free country, and in many places it's a free world. You can press the subscribe button. So, very good. More racing action coming to you soon. looking forward to next week, where in the Masters Crit we've already wrapped up the series championship for this series, and we'll see what we're going to do now that we've already wrapped up the championship with one more race to go. We have a lot of options. So anyway, be well, stay safe out there. Bye.
Why did you look back?